Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of the day it is you're listening to us. But this is the XP Billionaires podcast. I've got Sky along with myself, Rafe, and that's actually it today. So, yeah, Irene unfortunately has some things she's taking care of this week. So, we'll have her back again in the future, of course, back next week. But yeah, this week it's just going to be the two of us. Talking games. It's gonna be really weird.
I will do my best to fill the silence.
That doesn't inspire me with a lot of confidence, I'm afraid.
Thanks.
You're welcome. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. You're gonna do great. Okay, so yeah, we'll start with our every once in a while catch up. What have you been up to lately? What have you been playing? Anything finished?
I just finished Children of Zodiacs by Cardboard Utopia. It is a phenomenal strategy game, short, sweet, mechanically downright near perfect. It looks real nice, has a great art style. So I played it on PS4, but I know it is supposed to be available on PC as well, and I wholeheartedly recommend it. Won't take you long to get through it, but it is a lot of fun. They had like dice mechanics and deck building mechanics as well, which fuse together beautifully with the strategy combat. I've never played anything quite like it, and I think they really did a really great job. And full disclosure, I was part of the Kickstarter on this thing, but I hadn't played it yet. It's been out for a while, and I have to say, it was worth my investment.
That's awesome. It's nice to hear when that actually happens. Um, but I gotta say, like for a game like that, I would really love to see something like that on an actual tabletop. It felt perfect for it, and I think it would be fantastic.
It would. I would also like to see the company do another game in that world.
Hmm.
Like the story wraps up pretty nicely, but they could easily do something in that same sort of world, another story, and I think that would be really nice.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, well, we'll send out lots of fan mail then.
Well, I have no qualms about using Twitter, so there we go.
Definitely. As for me, I've gone straight down the rabbit hole. That is not great for me, but it also means I will be gaming for years to come. What I have done is I have, in the process of waiting for Trails of Cold Steel 2 to come out, I have dusted off my PSP and have started playing Trails in the Sky. And that is something we'll discuss a little later on in the program, but simply put, like I've started on a road that I can't easily get away from. Between the addiction to Trails and the addiction to the Yakuza games, which I've still not done, I can pretty much retire after I finish these games, I think. But I won't.
Yeah,
I
you've got a lot to keep you going. Like that's gonna take you probably a couple of years to get through everything.
Yeah, unless I, was not working and won like $1 billion, then maybe I could cut it down to a single year. But yeah, no, I'm good. And between that and putting in something every now and again just to keep my mind at ease and not be stuck in the same world over and over again, yeah, it is going to probably take that long. That much is true.
Indeed.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we should get on to the topic at hand. So today we are going to do a top three for you. Now, normally we could probably fill a half hour if the three of us were doing that top three, but we're going to try to do that with just the two of us today. And I think we could pull it off. I think we'll be able to get to a nice, good length and make sure you guys get some enjoyment out of it. As for our topic today, RPGs have been on basically every platform that I can remember. From even from the text-based days and the Commodores and your old PCs to with games like Zork, all the way up to our current generation. So they've been around a very long time. They've always just taken on different forms. But today I want to talk about portable gaming. It in a lot of cases, especially in cases like Sony, where you just don't hear about their platforms as much anymore with the Vita or the PSP. They put out a portable title. They didn't do enough advertising in it, but that doesn't change the fact that there were some fantastic games available for them, specifically RPGs too. And we're also the DS and 3DS. Those were much better advertised, but there were so many games. It's so hard to find the gems. So I thought we would talk about some of our favorites from the portable title. So that's what we're going to do. This week we're going to do the top 3 portable RPGs. Now, the games that we're talking about have to have originally been released on a portable device. If they've been ported later on, that's fine. But if they were just a console title ported to a portable device, sadly we can't count them. And I know that ruled a few out on your Sky, but dems the breaks.
Yeah, exactly. So things like, for instance, two of my favorite games on the PSP were Persona 3 Portable and Tactics Ogre Let Us Cling Together. Now, both of those were originally released on home consoles, so they have been eliminated from our lists here.
Yes, and I'm sorry for that, but
That's
I just
okay. I
want
have great ones to talk about anyway, so I'm happy.
to. Okay, all right. Well, in that case, why don't we start with you then? Let's start with your number 3.
So my number 3 is Luminous Arc for the DS. I've loved this game. It does not take itself seriously at all, and it's not terribly challenging, but it is sheer unadulterated fun and will have tons of surprises for you. So basically, the sort of starting concept is you're a character named Elf. He's a gunner, sort of a primitive gunner. I think it's a primitive rifle. And you're part of a band of witch hunters. So you're in a country that's basically run by a very sort of proto. In appearance, the church looks a lot like a Christian church, but it isn't. But you're aligned with them and you're witch hunters. I won't get into spoilers, but the plot turns on its head real quick. And it gets really subversive. While at the same time not taking itself seriously at all. It's so much fun. The characters and their designs are all really memorable, especially the witches. They put a lot of effort into making them interesting. So, like, if you're a big fan of cool spellcasters, cool, unique, atypical spellcasters, this is a good choice of a game to try. If you like a subversive game that doesn't take itself seriously and are just up for a good time, this is also a good game to try. It's also, because of its challenge level 2, it's not terribly inaccessible for beginners. So if you're not used to the genre, this isn't a bad game to play. I know Irene has played it and she doesn't really do strat games because she feels she's not very good at them, but this is one she did do and enjoyed. So a special call out, loved the Valley Girl Angel. I know that sounds terrible, but it is funny as heck.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, that's one I've cleared as well. I've only ever cleared the first one. I didn't clear the sequel afterwards, and we never got anything beyond the first 2 games.
No,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Now, luckily, they're only sort of thematically related.
Okay, well, no, that was an awesome choice. So let's move on to mine. So for my number 3, I went really, really obscure. I dug deep to find something that I really enjoyed, and this is not something I've heard anyone talk about in my travels talking RPGs. And the game I've chosen is for the DS. and it was called Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood. And yes, I am referring to Sonic the Hedgehog. This is the one and only Sonic the Hedgehog RPG that's ever been released. And believe it or not, it was released and developed by BioWare. I did not know this when I first played it, and I was not a big BioWare fan at the time, so it wouldn't have meant anything to me at that point. But so the game was unique in that you did not use any of the buttons. The game was solely reliant on the stylus and the touch screen. So in order to travel, you would drag the stylus in the direction you wanted to go. All of your commands, whether you were talking to someone, was tapping on the screen. And when you got into combat, all of the skills were touchscreen specific. Obviously, you either had to time a tap right, you had to hold something down, you had to swipe in a certain direction, follow a pattern in order for you to get the maximum possible damage. And while it seems like there might be a bit of a difficulty curve in that, there wasn't. It was really, really well catered to all audiences. So even if you weren't good at it, you were still doing some damage, but it was really meant for you to be able to do like the best possible damage and get through a fight really quickly and easily, if you were good at these things. But it was it was just fun and addictive. It was not hard. It was not long. It was with regards to a Sonic storyline, like a new enemy appears that's not Eggman, and it just became this whole saga where you start out by having to go rescue Knuckles, and it just becomes this whole story about an army that's taken the Chaos Emeralds and trying to destroy more than one world, if I remember it right. It's been a very long time, so I can only remember so much about the game, but each level had so many rings, and you had bonuses for collecting all the rings, that kind of thing. So there was a whole collection aspect to it. But it was just memorable in that you were playing a game that decided to take the main feature of the DS and use it to 100% of its potential. And I thought that was fantastic. And that's why this is really taking my number 3.
Awesome. Yeah, I never played that one, but you're right. I've never heard people talk about it. I think it kind of gets lost in you know, in Sonic's massive back catalog.
It really did. And if you didn't know it was there, you wouldn't look for it. And that's the thing. Like, and they didn't advertise it very well or anything like that. Like, you take a game like Super Mario RPG, everybody knows about it. It's
Hmm.
iconic at this point. And then you think, why hasn't Sonic done something like this? Well, that's the question I hear in a lot of cases. But when I tell them they did, they're like, what the hell are you talking about? And I have to explain that this is a thing that happened, and because it's a DS game, it's so much harder to come by unless you've got a really, really good used shop around. So it's unfortunate. It's something that a lot of people got missed during those times, and I honestly, it would have been a regret if I had done that too.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. You're
Yeah.
making me want to play it now, and I didn't play it back in the day, so.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, it was definitely interesting. And yeah, if we ever see another copy of it, I don't have one anymore, unfortunately. But yeah, I'll make sure I'll get a shot at it.
Cool. Cool.
All right. Well, let's then move on to our number 2. So, Sky, what is your number 2 for portable RPGs?
All right, so my number 2 is Fire Emblem Awakening for the 3DS. I loved this game. It is both the game that sparked major interest in the Fire Emblem series in the West and also the game that got me into Fire Emblem. So, caveat from the start, the story is nothing spectacular. But the characters are a lot of fun, and the gameplay is solid Fire Emblem fun. SRPG, solid combat. So basically, you've got a main character who is designed by you, but officially referred to by Nintendo as Robin. Is a tactician who meets up with a group called the Shepherds. And one of the things that made this game new and unique for Fire Emblem was the inclusion of time travel and having your cast's children come back to join your army. So with the support system where you could have two units talk to each other, you could actually have them get together in a relationship, and once you've done that, that sort of, I guess, sets it in stone, and the option to recruit their child opens up. And the cool thing is that you can sort of rig it so you can modify the kid to be how you want. So the kids are based on the mothers, with the exception of one. But basically, you have the mother dictates the kid, but their hair color changes depending on who the father is. And each parent can pass skills down to the kid. And this is important for when you want to pass on certain very powerful skills like Gale Force, which when you kill a unit, it allows that character to take another turn. In addition to this, there's boatloads of customization for everyone, with class switching, being able to keep and transfer certain skills. You can grind, which I believe was pretty much brand new to Fire Emblem at this point. Fire Emblem games up until this point were pretty linear in terms of you did certain maps in a certain order and you didn't get to deviate. The other thing about this game that makes it particularly interesting is that it's the first really, really accessible one. Not only with the ability to grind, but they have different difficulty levels. And for the first time, you got to be able to turn off permadeath if you didn't want to play with it. So this game is a great way to get into the series and see if you like the Fire Emblem gameplay. I had never played a Fire Emblem before, and I started with the easiest setting because I had played SRPGs before, but I had heard Fire Emblem was very different, and as it turned out, I didn't need to be on the easiest setting, but it was nice to have the option to feel like really comfortable getting into it. It's it's a really fun game, and I do recommend it. It's pretty nice looking for a 3DS game too, despite the fact it was one of the earlier games for the system. So yeah, that's that's what I have to say about Awakening.
No, it's definitely a lot, and it's clear you really, really enjoyed it. I do like that they factored the time travel into the story as well, which was something that later incarnations, I know Fire Emblem Fates just kind of shoehorned it in and didn't really give much of an explanation, which is kind of why I was a bit soured on the game. But Awakening, like, talked about it. The whole concept was that whatever was going on was affecting the future and people came back in time to stop it. So it was really cool. It was a really cool feature for them to do that. And I appreciate that they did it this way. I just wish they had learned from it and tried to figure out to incorporate it or just not do it.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I mean, in terms of Fates, I would have much rather had them not had that feature if they weren't going to do a good job of it. I do think it was one of the strongest aspects of Awakening that this was so well incorporated into the story and made a lot of sense for the plot. And a lot of the children characters too were very memorable themselves. I mean, one that comes to mind is Noir, Tarja's daughter, who I really love. She's very timid, but she has these moments of like berserkerness, which is really funny. Um, Considering how timid she is the rest of the time, and the fact that you don't usually expect an archer to have berserker moments. Like there was just a lot of really sort of memorable things about the characters in the game.
Definitely. Yeah, they all those kids had their quirks, and it was great. Okay, well, I guess we should move on and talk about my number two. And for that, my choice was another one that's a little bit on the obscure list, although maybe not as much with the release of some later games in its world. But my choice is Fate Extra for the PSP. It's part of the widely popular Fate Stay Night franchise, but it is set in an alternate timeline about a different Holy Grail war, which is basically being set inside a computer simulated world. Um, the gameplay itself had a simple pattern. It was a tournament style. You were fighting with your servant, but you had 3 days to learn about your opponent as much as you could to give yourself an advantage in battle. And the way that worked was when you, for each advantage you would get, you would be able to discover one of the moves they would take during a turn. Now, this is important because when you're in a fight was very much a rock, paper, scissors style combat system. So you set combos with so many actions, but the opponent's also doing this and you don't know what they're picking. So the more you learned about them, the easier it was to decipher their patterns and make it easier to deal more damage and build up your noble phantasm gauge much faster so you could do some serious damage.
Yes, one of the things I thought was really interesting is how this gameplay. I didn't finish Extra, but I played a good chunk of it. Um, is how they worked this aspect of learning more about your opponent, your opposing servant. You know, learning stuff about who they actually are as a way to um, defeat them in battle. And this is very much a Fate Stay Night uh, series norm that was
Mhm.
worked into the gameplay really nicely.
Yeah, it was an interesting aspect for it. Um, as for your servants, you actually got a choice of servant within the game. So you could choose a saber, an archer, or a caster. Now, that choice also dictated kind of the difficulty of the game. Saber being the strongest servant, you'd have a better stat advantage, so you'd do a little bit more damage, making fights a little bit easier. Casters did minimal damage but had status effects, that kind of thing, so it was a bit more complicated, whereas Archer was kind of straight down the middle in terms of the combat. And as you progress through the game, whichever one you chose, you got to learn more about who that servant was, which was a lot of fun. Yeah, I won't spoil who any of them are, but this game also spawned the current Fate Extella series. This was basically a direct sequel to those, or they are basically direct sequels to this original one. And but obviously they're in a different combat styles. They're more of a Muso style video game, which is great. Don't get me wrong, but it's definitely nothing like Fate Extra, and I have yet to find another game quite like it. So
Yes, it's very unique.
it really is. So it is available on the PSN for your Vita. So I do recommend picking it up if you do get the opportunity. But that is my number two game. It's definitely a unique twist on the RPG genre, and I can't say anything more than give it a shot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But that comes down to it for our best of the best. So I'm going to ask Sky for your number one portable RPG. Now, am I going to assume correctly that it will also be another strategy game? Because it seems to be your thing today.
Yes, yes, it is, because that's kind of how it worked out.
All right. Well, let's break out the let's get rid of the suspense. Let's hear what you have to say. What is your number one?
My number one is Jeanne d'Arc for the PSP. So this is an absolutely stellar game by Level 5, who is better known for games like Dark Cloud, Rogue Galaxy, um,
Yokai
Yokai
Watch.
Watch. This is one of their probably one of their least well-known titles, actually, and a standalone game that from the early PSP era. and it is superb. Basically, it's a fantasy world retelling of the story of Jeanne d'Arc, Joan of Arc. So, like, it has things like beast, beast people, magic, armlets which transform you into magical knights. It's not what you'd expect. And if you think you know the end of the story, well, it won't play out exactly how you might think. So enjoy that. Suffice to say, there are plenty of surprises still with the story, and the tale is very well told. The gameplay is solid SRPG combat. The challenge is reasonably high, but not ludicrously so. I played this a number of years ago, and I found it challenging, but still very doable. There's several very interesting elements about it. One of my favorites is I'm not sure how the word is pronounced in French. It's cuisse or something like that. Basically, it's the same character as Toadie from Rogue Galaxy. And it's this purple toad, giant purple toad. I mean, it's still relatively small, maybe the size of a dog. So, pretty big for a toad. Um, and what he does is he chews up these special crystals that are used to upgrade your characters, and he spits out a better upgrade crystal. So I spent so much time using Toadie to go through these crystals and combine them together and see what different combinations I could come up with to upgrade the various characters. Some of which I think are original, but others like Gilles de Rais in it, for instance. He's one of the most common names associated with Jeanne's story, and this is the Gilles of the era that she's alive before things go very, very south with that person. Um, so he's still a protagonist in this. Um, because he didn't go down the dark rabbit hole until after her death historically, but I can't recommend this game enough. It is really, really good, and it will keep you on your toes, especially if you know something about the history of Joan of Arc. And this is a really, really clever retelling of it.
It's nice to see that they can take something that's actually part of human history and just spin it on its head. It's one of the interesting ideas for storytelling because it gives you a lot of creativity on how you can do it, and clearly this game did a fantastic job of it.
Yes, I think it isn't talked about nearly enough, and I hope somebody listening to this goes out and gives it a try because it is a phenomenal game.
No, definitely it is. And you know what? That's what we try to do here is, we have our favorite game series and you'll hear about them a lot when we're on our show, but one of the things I like to try to do is to try to make sure people are made aware of titles that deserve the recognition that that get the recognition they deserve, I should say. And like that is a clear example. I mean, all of the games that we've talked about today have been clear examples. They're not on a lot of people's top 10 lists, they're not on people's top 5 lists, but they belong on some of them in my opinion. And I mean, I know this is all opinion, don't get me wrong, but we need to give more credit where credit's due, especially if a game gets overshadowed by a more popular title that's coming out.
Oh, sure, because there's always like these sort of not necessarily B tier in quality, but B tier in terms of recognition and not being released by a AAA studio or having an advertising budget that get overshadowed by big titles coming out from major publishers. And that is really a shame because some of the most interesting, original stuff is done by smaller studios, smaller publishers, and they don't get half the recognition they deserve. So I think it's something I feel really strongly about as well, is giving these games the recognition they deserve. And, let's not let them fade from people's memories when we talk about awesome RPGs. I refuse to only talk about stuff released by Square Enix. As I know, you often hear people who talk about RPGs, like so much of it is Square Enix stuff. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but no, the world of RPGs is so much more than that.
Yeah, and we'll get people turned over one publisher at a time. Alrighty, well, it's time for mine. Are you guys all ready for this? I'm sorry because I know I spoiled it kind of at the beginning, but my number one is The Legend of Heroes, Trails in the Sky, unsurprisingly. Basically, this is one of the crown jewels of the PSP. Trails in the Sky helped pave the way for what is probably one of the most well-built worlds in an RPG series. And Sky, I'm sorry for what I'm about to say here, but Suikoden, I love you, but I honestly think you've been dethroned in the terms of world building for games.
Sacrilege.
I know, but hear me out. This game opened up a world that spans three games in its own series, two spin-off games, and then the Trail of Cold Steel series, which is four games in total. If I haven't missed anything, which it's very possible I have, that's at least nine games in total, and they all have connections to the same world, the same storyline, the same political structure. It's all connected, and it's from what I can see and tell so far from what I've played, it's been fantastic. The game follows two recently appointed junior bracers, basically a private organization that helps citizens. So they're not government funded. Their goal is to protect the citizens of the countries they're in. These two, Estelle and Joshua, who find out that their father has gone missing during a mission. So they set out on a quest to find him, only to get involved in something larger than they ever thought was possible. And, everything's got to be go big or go home in these types of games, of course. Combat itself is solid for a turn based game. It does involve a movement structure, but it's not nearly as complex as a strategy game that anything that you've talked about today. But the attack ranges are definitely a factor in whether or not you're going to land a hit. So it's either moving in close or getting into a certain distance to be able to take that hit. Um, Character customization includes your standard equipment system. You've also got orbments, which has become a staple in the Trails games. But basically, it's a system that where you equip gems that modify your stats, but also allow for the use of arts or basically magic. And as you progress as well, you also pick up crafts, which is physical skills that use a separate skill pool, point pool from your standard HP and EP in this game. You actually have a third pool for CP that's built up as you hit or get hit, which is an interesting system. It's a double-edged sword because you can pool it together to do a stronger ability, but if your character falls in battle, they lose all their CP, even after they're revived, which is really unfortunate, but it just adds to the challenge of it. Like this is now my current gaming addiction, and for traditional RPGs, this is going to be it for a while. Between the Trails of the Sky series, all of its spin-offs, which I know a lot of them have been fan translated, so they will be available. And then with Cold Steel 2 coming out in just a few weeks, yeah, there is no escape for me at this point, which is why Trails in general is getting my number one spot for the moment for RPGs, but Trails in the Sky is definitely good for the portables because it's what's starting it all.
Yeah, you're going to be busy for quite a while with all that. And I'd like to play them too eventually. Eventually.
Yeah, you got just as much coming on your plate as I do, so you've got a new Atelier game anytime now.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Coming in the mail, I ordered the special edition of Atelier Lalua, and it hasn't arrived yet, so as soon as it does, I'll be starting that.
Oh yeah, definitely. But on that note, that is our top three portable RPG games. I went a little more traditional-ish, whereas you went very much strategy, which is not a bad thing. So you've got a lot to look at depending on your genre and your interests. So all of these are highly recommended. We you get our seals of approval, so definitely check them out. If you have any questions about any of them, you can always give us a shout on our social media. You can find me on Twitter at BillionairesXP. You can also now find me on Instagram at Rayfe, all one word. And you can check out my Twitch streams every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, and that's at Rayfe on Twitch. Sky, where can people talk to you about your games?
I'm at Sky Knight XP on both Twitter and Twitch, and you can get everything that we do on our website, xpbillionaires.wordpress.com. It's kind of the grand portal to everything that we do.
That includes our YouTube and our transcripts for all of our episodes, courtesy of our XP Hobo, Hannah Bard.
Exactly, exactly.
And also, don't forget to check out Irene. I know she wasn't here today, but she's still very much a member of the Billionaires. You can find her at irogue_XP on Twitter, as well as Twitch. And she'll be typically Twitch streaming on Thursday nights, whereas I know Sky does Tuesday nights typically.
Yes, yes, I do.
And last but not least, we keep doing this. We keep loving to do this, and we love all the support we get from you guys. But if you do want to show a little bit of extra support, you can check out our coffee page and send us a donation. That's coffee.com/xpbillionaires. So that's going to wrap it up for us this week. And you know what? I said it before. I'll say it again. I'll never stop saying it. Keep gaming, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Bye now.
Bye bye.